Well, hey, thanks for stopping by for a lessons learned for the Kings Road Young Lions campaign. As we're wrapping up things, wanted to take a moment to acknowledge everyone's effort, creativity, and commitment all along the way, and really start talking about what I learned DMing this campaign. I think what it really boiled down to was good planning, strong relationships, and a little bit of luck, but it was pretty successful. So let me introduce myself first. My name is Saucey, the Dungeon Master. Actually, my real name is Tim, and I've prior to this campaign have never completed a D&D module. I have finished a campaign using a homebrew system years and years ago, but of the dozen or so campaigns that I've tried to run, this is the only one that came all the way through. So most DMs know what it's like to fail in a campaign, and a lot of the times it's not your fault. Sometimes it is your fault, but things seem to work out this time around, and I wanted to share some of the reasons why I think they did. My preparation for going into this campaign was just to play a single online one shot with a group that I found on Reddit, and it worked out really well. So I figured, what the heck, I had the hang of it, and why not just jump right in? I know wrestling, I knew D&D, and it seemed like a match made in heaven. So here's a quick recap of the main story beats and character arcs. This party was thrown together when a tournament was announced, and they went on a 7-part MacGuffin quest, which got derailed about halfway through when the story stopped being about sport and competition and turned into a quest for vengeance to destroy evil and return peace to the kingdom. The characters went from being lost souls with rough connection to each other to being extremely powerful and very important throughout the kingdom. And we saw that with the epilogues that we ran in the other episode not that long ago. Their quest culminated in a final battle against the big bad endgame Vance McDragon, who was a bit of a super warlock who turned into a literal dragon. Of course, he was inspired by Vince McMahon, a figure which I don't think there are many people who really admire him anymore as an individual. So it made it very easy to adopt that as our big bad. But Vance was supplemented by a 4-member squad of elite sub-bosses and a supremely powerful lieutenant by the name of Alfarius Cone, which was a total ripoff of The Undertaker. So big boss battle at the end, 7-parter. It worked out pretty good. So the purpose of this discussion, like I said before, is just to have a constructive conversation to identify what worked well and what could be improved on. So let me just start right with the best parts of the campaign, right? The best moments, my favorite moments. There are a few of them. There are many of them, but the ones that really stick out in my mind, the first big turning point was the appearance and the untimely death of Nyx. Nyx was the heavy for the Hardway gang. The party had used some trickery, some spell casting to force him to assist them into stealing a pirate ship and sailing away. Of course, once they got out into open seas, they had the problem of having to figure out what do you do with Nyx. He knows too much, and they decided to off Nyx, which was a very tense moment because the party did not agree on what needed to be done there. But Nyx is a name that continued to be brought up throughout the entire campaign. It was that inside joke that it was always funny, always brought up. Many NPCs had known of the character, so it was easy to name drop and to bring that back. It was cool. Another favorite moment of mine was the whole cousin Roman story arc, which was a alternate personality for one of the players, Solomon Scribbles, where Solomon joined the Hardway gang. That was coincidentally the same gang that Nix was a part of. Cousin Roman infiltrates the gang, gets them to do some of his bidding, finds some information from them, makes some friends along the way, and then turns on them and it just completely destroys their clubhouse in an epic moment. Very satisfying end to that story arc. It was really, really good. And that exploding urn, which was the vessel for that bomb, was the big shiny that was introduced in the middle of that campaign. They forged a second urn to put a bomb in there, blew it up. They could have detonated it early and possibly had a player or two perish in that explosion, but they didn't. They held onto it, and they even finished the campaign still holding onto that urn, thinking, what are we going to do with this urn? We're going to use it for leverage in some way, but they never needed to. So they're still holding on to it. And that's the big question after the campaign. Oh, what do we do with it now? And the answer is you hold on to it. And my fourth favorite moment there is how do we put this? A member of the party told Ambrose to go take a walk. So Ambrose, who was running a brothel at the time, goes and walks for 16 hours straight in a direction under the power of suggestion before turning around and walking back. And Ambrose is a lover, not a fighter, so he and his glorious mustache were very upset by the time they got back. And what started as a funny joke turned into a plot device for me to separate the party from their sponsor and to show them that there are consequences for pranking some of these folks. So that was a bit of a guilty pleasure for me. That tickled me to say, oh, you're going to treat the NPCs like that? Well, I'm going to treat you like this. But it actually affected the players a lot more than I thought it would, and I felt kind of guilty about that afterwards. But for those reasons, it really sticks out in my mind. So, outside of those favorite moments, what other NPCs, battles, and story beats really stood out the most? And I would think the Hard Way is a set that really is memorable in all of this. They were the first rival faction that the party ran into, and they were just the arch nemesis for at least half of the campaign. And then after that, they were pretty much just scattered into the wind. But the Hard Way as a gang really felt like they had some depth, right? They had the numbers, they were established in different places, they knew what they were doing, they had charisma, they had muscle. The Hard Way was cool, so much in fact that it's very tempting to want to run this campaign back from the perspective of the Hard Way and maybe have the characters be a little bit more neutral or evil, maybe, to tell the story of their rise to success. So maybe 10 years before the events of the King's Road Young Lions, we tell the story of the rise of the Hard Way. That would actually be pretty cool. I'm tempted to do that. The greatest battle that was in the game, I believe, was the Grapplemania Massacre, which started as a battle royal, and then upon Bronson being awarded as the victor of that battle, was interrupted by the darkness as this new evil presence introduced themselves, and then a massacre ensued all around them. Portals opened up and these hell spawns started attacking, and it just completely turned the entire campaign upside down. It let the party know that, you know what, maybe we don't have all of this figured out. Up until that point, they felt pretty much indestructible. But things really got taken up a notch as we introduced magic into the equation and real evil into the equation. That battle was done in stages where we had the battle royal, and then we had these gibbering mouthers uh, appear in the ring, and then we started having these almost like zombie type henchmen running around. There was an epic promo by a figure named the Darkness, which was a Bray Wyatt fiend knockoff, and then that figure, the Darkness, took his final form and was this gigantic, otherworldly, uh, you know, just warp spawn beast creature. Like it just kept amping up, amping up. And it culminated in the party ultimately being successful through some very intelligent tactics. I think it was a gang of smoke EFEDs that really monopolized the action economy. They did a great job of lighting up the room, taking away that veil of darkness that would have put them in a lot of trouble. And then afterwards, they decided to hightail it out of town and blow up that urn. So it was a really cool moment. And then the cherry on top is we introduced Vance McDragon at that point, sitting atop a hill in his mansion, looking down on this chaos and just reveling in it. Uh, it was done very well. There was music that went with it. It was timed well. I think it was one of those situations where I had 2 or 3 weeks to prepare for that, and the a lot of effort was put into making it right, and it just worked. It was really cool. At the end of the campaign, we had this final fight, which turned out to be multiple steps along the way. The final fight, I think, maybe was a little anticlimactic because the party had really used a lot of their abilities. But the first four fights there against the Elite Four, the Iron Masters, inside the Bloodkeep with that triple cage pyramid, that was really cool. Uh, I thought that was awesome. They fought each one of these Iron Masters, and each one was able to solo the entire party. So you just kind of had the feeling of, wow, if two of these attack us at the same time, I mean, we would have been dead for sure. We would have been a goner. But it really made it feel like the Iron Masters had earned that spot, and that the party was really in danger there. So we had Hannah KRYL, which was the murder clown. We had Ruxin Crow, who was the demon. Then we had the Infinite Warrior, and then Capital D, or at least the zombified remains of Capital D. Uh, it worked. It was cool. I don't regret any of that. So, do I have a favorite session or arc? Picking between the Bloodkeep and Grapple Mania, the final boss battle at Grapplemania, definitely the best session by far. And I think that was really at the midway point of the campaign. So, talking about character growth and development, the question is, do I feel like the characters really had a satisfying progression? And that's a hard question to answer because I don't play the characters, so I'm talking about from the outside looking in. Certainly, each one of the characters became much more powerful, and they were never intended to become so powerful. When we had planned the number of sessions and the number of levels that would be gained, we far surpassed that. So we had to keep scaling up the challenge rating to match what these characters were able to do. But we also had to develop them all individually through their personality. You know, how did they grow as a person? And the attempt was made to give each one of them equal camera time, but it certainly felt like Bronson and Rosa were very well developed, more than the other players. Zinthral had a great story arc that just never got completed. And I wish that we were able to show a little bit more growth with Solomon and Gator. It felt like they were kind of along for the ride and down for whatever, which is appreciated. And a great support character needs to be able to do those things. Uh, they were both supremely important. There were times when each one of them saved the entire campaign and kind of broke what I had planned. But it's very nice to be surprised by your players in that way. Um, I think those two characters deserve a lot more credit because they were much more important to the success of the group than people may realize. Whereas Bronson and Rosa is pretty visible. Bronson taking most of the aggression, dealing most of the damage. Rosa being such a protective figure. Um, I think it's the support crew that really was the glue that held it all together. So, what were the moments that really made us feel immersed in the story? We talked about some of them already, but there were other ones that it really felt like we were in it. And for me, the first time was when the party is on a pirate ship and they're sailing away from the burning docks behind them. It felt like at that point, this is the beginning of the quest. Everything before that was just the prelude, and now things had gotten real because now they have earned their first badge. They made some enemies. They survived the fight. They have a vehicle to travel, and they know where they're going. That felt like boom. It was maybe the end of the pilot episode and the beginning of a season that everybody was in agreement. Yeah, we're in. Let's go. We are in for it. So I love that. The Hardway ship again, as a reminder, was called the Fast and Hard. Gross, but it works, right? All pirate ship or boats are supposed to have dirty names, right? The next moment where I felt like the party really came together and they needed each other was when they were fighting with the wolf pack at the dandelion hole, right? So Rosa was about to be detained. She had struggled free, and Gator had greased around the ground. There was a big pit in the ground, and they all decide we're going in the pit. So they jump down there, and I think it's Zinthral who snaps his leg, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh crap, what do we do with this? Are we going to carry an injured person through? How do we get out of this hole to begin with? So they start thinking about, how are we going to heal this person? How are we going to carry them? And then all of a sudden, there's all these magical creatures that start to spring to life around them. And then it's like, oh, we don't have time to take a short rest here and figure out what to do. Like, we got to move now. And the party really worked together to get through that dungeon. They had learned not to do certain things with certain monsters that were in there, and it was cool. That felt like D&D to me. That felt like old school D&D dungeon crawl. I loved it. Another great battle was inside the corrupted temple, where there is the daughter of Vance McDragon, and she is working on becoming a Lich Queen. Right? She's gathering souls from people in the town. Her influence is spreading everywhere. There's undead ghosts and zombies and other nasty things all around this temple. She's got a force field around, and the party is able to infiltrate this dark cathedral, and formerly Rosa's cathedral, and they all knew she has to be stopped. We got to take her down. We cannot let her become a Lich Queen. She has to pay for what she's done to the sacred place. She's related to the person who we hate the most. Like she was just white hot, so much heat on her at the moment, and put up a hell of a battle there. Some really cool things happened. Some Circle of Death, and some poisonous smoke clouds, some reanimated skeletons. So it was cool. It was I thought it was really cool. I had never ran a lich before, and with this being a mild lich, there was no power word death to be used just yet. Uh, there were some criticisms that the lich was weaker than it should have been. Well, this was, the beginning of a demi lich, not quite there yet. So that was the explanation given, is that she had ambitions on becoming that. But it's still really cool. I think Rosa got the final strike on her, and hadn't really killed many people up until that point. So it was that was a cathartic moment. That was great. And then finally, I felt fully immersed at the end when the party's getting ready to go to the Capitol and they're assembling the Avengers. They're calling in all their favors. They're going all around the world through their fast travel portal, and they're gathering their friends. They're saying, "We're in. We got to go now. It's an all-out assault on the Capitol. The gateway is open. We have to make our move before McDragon really opens a portal to hell." And it was cool to have them phone in all their friends. So all those NPCs got to show back up, and it felt like those relationships finally paid off. That was a really cool immersive moment for me, because it felt like, oh yeah, we have friends, and uh, we don't have to do this alone. And it that had to be a good feeling, to feel like, because we treated people well, they came back and they helped us later. So I love that. Now, any campaign is not without its challenges and frustrations, and this one certainly is no exception to that. So, what kind of encounters and plot points and mechanics were really frustrating for me? Well, I want to say I certainly felt frustrated as the DM, and I know you're not supposed to feel like it's the DM versus the players, but at times it just felt like Bronson was it just couldn't miss. He always went first, always high in initiative, and he hits with every attack. He's got 6 attacks, and they all hit, and one or two of them are crits. So it's like, well, if that's the case, then I'm really going to have to jack up the hit point values on everything that you guys face. Not only that, if Bronson's going to run in head first and he's going to take half damage or no damage on things, then we've got to start introducing magical damage and things. So the game really was tweaked to nerf Bronson a little bit. And I'm not a math wizard, and I certainly don't know Bronson's character sheet, so I always relied on the players. Tell me what you do. Tell me what's going on here. And I trust that each one of them know what's going on. So there was never a moment where I doubted and I thought the player was getting away with something. It was like, man, I just need to up my game a little bit here. I don't care if we've got a min-maxer in the midst here, or if the character or if that class is really just built that strong. If it wasn't challenging for them, it was not going to be satisfying. So we just ramped up the challenge level. We added more actions per round. We shook up the action economy and just made it work. But it was certainly frustrating at first when it was like, really, really, okay, great. Now, I should have been happy that sped up the combat, but it definitely felt like, am I getting screwed here? But I never thought that I was. So the challenge is always to try to challenge the players without outright killing them, and at times it felt like they weren't at risk at all. Certainly in the first half of the campaign, where they're just engaging in some friendly sporting contest, they were never at risk of dying. So later in the campaign, during the second half of the campaign, then the stakes were raised, and not only could the players die, but people they cared about were at risk. And I think that's where it really challenge the players because they felt some urgency where we have to go save this person, we have to find this person, we have to protect this person, and that was their vulnerability. They didn't care if you did anything to them, but when you start going after their loved ones, then that was a real problem. Um, I never wanted to kill anybody. That's got to feel awful. I've had players killed before, and it just makes you feel like, why are we here? Why are we doing this? You know, with the new version of D&D, they let you roll these death saves, and most DMs, when you're about to make a foolish decision, will say, "Are you sure you want to do that?" As the clue that, hey, this could potentially get you killed. This may be irreversible. So, are you double sure you want to do that? Because if I tell you something bad, I don't want you to be mad at me. There were a couple situations like that, but not too many. And at the end, against Vance McDragon, to have a total party kill because a dragon shows up after they are completely tapped out of spell slots and potions and abilities, it would have felt bad to TPK and not get the ending that we wanted. So we kind of angled it a little. We made it work. Um, a big moment of, how do I put this? There was a very uncomfortable moment about a third of the way through the campaign where the party is in Colville and two of its members go up on top of the mountain. It's Bronson and Zinthral, who have this rivalry going. And Bronson is very unlucky in his dice rolls and doesn't succeed as quickly as Zinthral does at a slap fight. The game mechanics that I had added, basically a mini game, the game mechanics did not work in his favor, and it felt like he was kind of getting screwed here. And the player got really quiet for a while. We all kind of forgot that he had abilities he could have used that would have assisted him. And as a DM, I didn't do a great job of saying, "Hey, would you like to try to do this?" So he felt cheated, and the rest of the party was just quiet, just sitting back and just letting it happen. And then afterwards, there's a rivalry between Zinthral and Bronson, where Zinthral knows something that happened that the rest of the party doesn't, and Bronson is ashamed of that, doesn't want everybody to know. I thought that was a great plot hook that could be exploited later, but we never got that far. We never got to it. So the players all knew what happened, but the characters didn't all know. In that same line of thinking, the mini game at Iron Vale was also a little anticlimactic. It was basically a Rochambeau mechanic, rock paper scissors, where there was just a schmoz underground fight club where the only way to earn your badge is just to beat the snot out of each other, right? There were no winners or losers. It was just, you just fight to at the leisure of the warden of that district. But Bronson did not want to go down, and again, just very unlucky. It had seemed as though Zinthral was always lucky in his rolls. He got the right rolls at the right times, and early on, Bronson was not getting those rolls. So it was like, oh no, here we go again. Here we go again. This is this. It was uncomfortable because I wanted them to succeed there, and it was my fault for having such a random mechanic thrown in there. And again, we didn't really think about using some of our other abilities and bringing that into the minigame, which we probably should have. The final challenge here was the plot point of the Hearth Foundation, which many of the characters had associations with the Hearth Foundation. It feels like we did a poor job of weaving them into our story. They were kind of this underground rebel group that was there to support the party in their efforts, but the party didn't really need them. There was never a point where they really needed the assistance or to be bailed out by anybody. And for the DM to infuse them into a story where they're not really needed, it would have felt very forced. So, the Hearth Foundation was a common thread that let the characters know that they had something in common, but they just didn't. They just didn't produce a whole lot. So ultimately, my decision was just to kill them off towards the end of the show there, and it was just easier to do that because nothing fruitful was really coming out of it. So overall, I felt like the pacing of the show was right. It wasn't supposed to take as many episodes as it did, but it had to in order for it to make sense. And I mean, sometimes that's just the case when you've got 2 hours. Your sessions are only 2 hours long. You're only going to get so much. You're only going to get so much content done in 2 hours. So what would happen is we would start a little slow. We'd really get moving there, and then the end of each one of those sessions would feel a little rushed or cheap at times. And then there was always an effort to leave us at a cliffhanger, so we had something to think about before the next session, and we could hit the ground running with more energy. It worked most of the time. So sometimes it didn't quite land, or we had to retcon how we finished the previous session. But I would do it the same way. Maybe I would split the sessions up. So instead of it being a weekly show at 2 hours per week, maybe it's every other week we do 3 hours, and then that way nothing feels rushed. There's plenty of time to plan. But in general, the pacing of the content, the leveling up, I think it was just right. And was I ever unsure of what to do next or lost as the DM? No. No. There was always a plan from the beginning. And even when the party strayed from the plan, there was time to pivot into a story that made sense. So we certainly didn't follow the railroad. Other than, this MacGuffin quest, you got to go to all 7 stations before you can go to the boss. The party always had the ability to go in whatever order they wanted. The point at which I felt the most lost is after they had collected all the badges and they went to the final boss. Then the challenge is on me. How do you make a memorable final boss battle? How do you wrap it up? How do you close it? And I had gotten so used to building up the anticipation for the next episode that I didn't know how to, go out with a bang. So maybe it felt like we jumped the shark a little bit. The intention was to make them bleed, but not to kill them, and still give the players agency over their own actions. I wanted them all to feel panicked, like, I'm not sure if we're going to win this thing. And I think we achieved that. But since that was the last episode we did, I'm never going to stop thinking of what if I had done it a little bit differently? Could have made it a little bit better. I'm not going to get another chance to go back and retcon that. It is what it is. It's canon now. So I've never felt more lost than I did after it was over. That's the best way to put it. So with this party, the combat was pretty on point, but were there enough opportunities for the players to roleplay? And I think so. I mean, there were probably 100 NPCs for them to interact with. Some of them were they were magnetic, right? The players were automatically drawn to them, and that's because they were all based on real pro wrestlers. So there was this predetermined expectation of what those characters would be like. And if the player had a fascination with the real life pro wrestler that the NPC was based on, they would go do the thing, say the line, like let's see if he does what we expect him to do, and that was a lot of fun. So they would socially interact with the characters that they really identified with. If I had the chance to do it over again before the campaign started, I would ask each player, who are your 10 favorite pro wrestlers? And then I would find a way to sprinkle them in along the way. In addition to all those NPCs, we had all these locations that they could go to with different cultures and different fighting styles. Each one was geographically a little bit different. So if a player didn't like how things were in one place, they could go to the next place, and then it was a chance to restart, a chance to explore a little bit. Um, I'm pretty confident that I did my job there with the number of locations that we had. It wasn't too many locations, and it wasn't too few locations. It was, we had about 10 different locations where we were centered throughout the campaign. And I think that was fun. Now, heavy social interaction. Did the party need to negotiate? Did they need to deceive? Did they need to intimidate or persuade? At times, yeah. Yeah, there were tense moments with NPCs. And the players, I'll admit, are better voice actors than I am. So I did my best to give each one of the NPCs their own voice and to make it seem like they were real. It worked most of the time. There were some times where I'm sure it did not land. And there were probably some characters who were too similar to other characters. So they just kind of all bled in together. But there was plenty of time to explore, to interact, and to make friends. I think everybody would agree with me on that. The party itself was a pretty cohesive unit. I believe they were, and the dynamic among that party worked well. It seemed like they really they complemented each other. They knew what their roles were, and they were successful in the end. Strategically, they each did their part pretty good. Now, I'll say before Zinthral left the party, I don't know that that was true. Zinthral was a bit of a wild card. So if the party was setting up something, you could count on Zinthral coming in and just doing something unexpected, or he was just unpredictable. And while that had to be incredibly frustrating for the party, it was fun for me as a DM to have that agent of chaos just always in there, creating tension and upsetting the balance of how things are. It made my job a little bit easier because I didn't have to create the suspense and increase the level of danger because I had a player in there doing it for me. But of course, we know that Zinthral left. Maybe the tension between players was real and just didn't want to take it anymore. I don't think that's the case. I think real life just got in the way. But when he did leave, I took it personally, and it had me wondering what could I have done to get that player to stay. Some DMs feel that way, especially new DMs. Every player they lose is a gut punch, but experienced DMs just know that people wash out. People wash out all the time, and you're either going to continue with who's left or you're going to try to replace them. So early on, we replaced the two we lost, and later on, we decided, you know what? No, Zinthral is irreplaceable. So we're going to move on, and Snugglecup, Face Ripper, the pet lion, is going to be the fifth member of our party. So Snug started to develop some advanced skills, and it just worked. And it made the action economy work that much better because players didn't have to wait as long in between their turns. So now I want to shift back the perspective to the DM. And what worked well from my perspective, um, we we talked about this before, but the Hardway Gang was a great decision on my part. Of course, they're modeled after the NWO, iconic wrestling faction, and they made the story really easy for me because of just how dynamic they were as a group in real life. They could be the same thing in the game. Sometimes they are charismatic and uh, you want to have a beer with them and make friends with them, and then other times they're just arrogant and despicable. They just worked. They worked. That was a great decision. The Kings Road badge system was also another great mechanic. It's what drove the party. We got things we got to do. There is a time limit to get them done. We need to get it done for this reason. And all those things were established early on. It kept the party moving. It made them travel. It made them want to uh, fight certain people. It worked. The badge system was great. Now, if we continue the campaign, there is no badge system anymore. And now it's like, well, how do you drive things? Halfway through the campaign, that the party had the decision to make: do we want to continue down the King's Road getting these badges where nobody else even cares anymore? And the decision was, what, we've gone this far, let's see this thing through. And I think that they're really proud of that. It would be interesting to roll back the clock and to do a campaign that happened as a prequel to this campaign, where the King's Road badge system was very much instrumental in society, and it remains intact throughout. I think there's a lot of opportunities there to do some interesting stories. The Darker Order taking over for the hard way and kind of dismantling that badge system was another great decision, because now that you've introduced evil into the equation, now you can start bringing in things like undead characters, characters from other planes. You can bring in, real evil, and everybody wants to stop evil. Especially when you have good characters in your party. So uh, that worked well, because it was, for whatever complaints the party had about the kingdom or the current form of government, the Darker Order was definitely going to be a worse situation. So it raised the odds. Um, it raised the stakes. Throughout the entire competition, and even through the Darker Order and their time taking over, there was always whispers and nods to who was at the top of the King's Road. The world champion Alfarius Cone, the four Iron Masters, and they were being sold as they are the best of the best of the best. So, in order to bring them into the show, have the party fight them, and for them to really hold up to all that hype was always going to be a challenge. But it set the mark for where the competition needs to be. There was always, well, we need to fight the Iron Masters, and they all won this championship before. They all completed the King's Road and won the tournament, so they must be very good at combat. And that was shown later on when they were in these combats where it was 4 and 5 on one, and they still struggled with taking down these Iron Masters. So it worked, it clicked, and no regrets about that. Early on, we had talks about what mechanics to use and which ones we would homebrew. There really weren't a lot of homebrew rules that were added in to our campaign. We ran pretty much vanilla D&D 5e, but we limited some of the rules, right? We limited some of the races and the classes to keep things simple. We really focused on narrative and not on representation. You know, um, there was no need to bring the party into every business and for it to be like the bar from Star Wars, where you've got an orc, a dwarf, a gnome, an elf, a human, a dragonborn, every other race. There was no need to focus on the demographics of the people in each town. The focus was always on the story. And I kind of had forgotten that not everybody was human, because you think about pro wrestlers, they're all human. So because we were so immersed in the story, race was never a part of it. The only time race was ever brought in was if we had somebody who was very short. You go to the Gnome Depot, and it's like, oh yeah, they're gnomes, and they have gnomish customs, like the gnomish goodbye, where they Eskimo kiss or they rub noses together. I don't know what the modern term for that is supposed to be, but and then with Rosa having the little legs, and Bronson being much bigger than everybody else. The size gags were fun at times, but there was never a push to say no. There's a real difference between the races in the game, because that would have been a distraction for us. So instead, we just focused on story, and that worked great. The mechanics of combat also worked really well. Using Roll20, we really stuck to the movements and the mechanics that they have built into D&D 5e, and visually it worked. Right? If there was any question about, hey, does this thing work this way, we always erred on the side of the players. We always said if there's any question, ties go to the player, and that just kept things moving along and kept everybody happier. And as we went on, of course, all the monsters were homebrewed. Um, their stat blocks were homebrewed, but it was always to meet the party's level. And we did a pretty good job of balancing the challenge rating of those monsters with the levels of the character. So, I really think we got dialed in about halfway through. We really hit our stride on that, and the game was really balanced. So, in the future, how would I make DMing, prep work, session management, how would I make all that easier? Well, I cannot recommend enough using tools like Roll20, Home Brewery, Google Docs, pretty much any AI tool that you have. Some people in this community of D&D say that AI is cheating and you don't need it when there's so much content out there. Use your noodle, come up with it yourself. Well, I'm sorry. When you're doing prep work and you don't have much time, it's a 2-hour session, so that means you're probably doing 2 to 4 hours of prep work before the session. I needed help from AI. There are some DMs who can just do all this on the fly. They've seen every module, they've been through every situation. They know how the monsters behave because they've been playing this game for 15, 20 years. Not me. I've always been on the fringe of one of those guys that, hey, I want to play. And I figured out if I was going to play the game I wanted to play, I needed to be the DM, and then I had to learn how to do all these things. So I used AI, and it helped me immensely. So use AI for your images. Being able to provide a graphic for an NPC is so much better than theater of the mind. And then being able to accompany a battle or a monologue or something with audio, just it feels right when you get it right. So use an app like Suno will do very high quality music, either instrumental or with lyrics, and you can make a very professional product with just a little bit of tinkering around. Now, I say that um, ironically because we had a friend of the show, Music and Gaming, who created a theme song for the show, and it's a great theme song. It's and to be able to watch a musician go through his creative process and come up with it was really cool, and I'm eternally thankful for that. Um, but for a while, that's you can only play that song so many times before you're like, okay, we got to mix it up a little bit. We want a different vibe in this city or in this fight. So that's when starting to bring in some battle music from Suno worked really well. And then finally, if you need narrative content and if you have an idea for what you want to do with your campaign, you just need to connect the dots. That's where you bring in something like ChatGPT and you say, hey, make this make sense. I want to hit these story beats. How can I connect them? That's when you go to generative AI like ChatGPT and you can connect those dots and just make it work. If you need a magic item or if you need a stat block, if you need to know the cost of an item in game and you don't want to spend a lot of time looking this stuff up, if you need to know the ruling on how a spell works, just go to the AI, plug it in, and especially if you're playing online, nobody will even know what you're doing. Just make sure that you don't have a clicky keyboard or a clicky mouse, and they'll think that you just have all this on the top of your mind. So what else could we improve? You know, or were there times where the pacing was off, the balance was off, the plot was unclear? And yeah, the answer is yes. Because we certainly underestimated how long it would take to complete the campaign, but the goal was always, hey, we're going to see this thing through. That's my promise to you. I'm not going to give up on this. You keep showing up, I'll keep showing up. It just took over a year to get it all done. The early encounters seemed too easy for the party, from my point of view. Uh, some of the players were worried and they thought they were at risk, and other ones never felt they were at risk until they got close to the end. There were also some homebrew mechanics that I sprinkled in here and there, some magic items, and some ultimate techniques that I think I did a poor job of explaining what they did. And I may have even given away too many abilities too quickly. By the end, these characters had so many abilities that they forgot what they even had. They had so much gear, they forgot what the gear does. So it kind of cheapened everything. The players found an item that was their favorite, and that's what they stuck to. So I think this idea of you can only attune to so many items at once is a good plan, because then you're going to have 3 magic items. Those are the only 3 you have to remember, and you have to be selective about which ones you're choosing. So maybe that would be something I would implement later on. And finally, as far as locations go, the final gym city of Rumble Reef was executed pretty poorly, in my opinion. It didn't make a lot of sense what it was, why it existed, uh, and certainly was the weakest of the 7. The party wasn't there for very long. The gym fight was in a dream world, so even that didn't happen inside the city. If I could go back, I would flesh it out a little bit more, but the pressure was on at that time to wrap it up, and that's what we did with Rumble Reef. Overall, the party was very easy to manage. We've got some great people playing the game, and I think that everybody understood what they could get away with and when they were maybe pushing the envelope. So I was always paranoid and panicked and pessimistic about how things were going, but I never got that vibe from any of them. So behind the scenes, what kind of headaches was I having that affected the game? And I think I was very upfront with the party that, hey, I'm still learning this. Be patient with me. Help me out. I tried to be humble and say, look, I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. Can you guys fill me in on what the ruling should be? And they did. They were great in that regard. They never felt they never made me feel like I should know something and I didn't know it. So I felt like I was prepared, and if I wasn't, that they would help me get through. Um, the headaches that I had was early on. We agreed to leave certain conversations out of the game, right? And these are the ones um, that we all know about, divisive topics. With the campaign happening during a particularly hostile election year, we had to be even more careful about not interjecting opinions on political matters when they popped up. And I'll say it this way, it is very likely that the players in this game do not share the same personal beliefs that I have on sex, religion, politics, pop culture. I am sure are at odds and do not agree on those things. But there was a gentleman's agreement between everybody that those things were not important for the overall success of the game. So we kept those separate, we compartmentalized, and it worked. So there were many situations where I felt like I had to be the dad of the game instead of a player, and that I had even more of a responsibility to, if I had an opinion on something, to keep it to myself and to just let the kids play. You know, hopefully it felt that way, and hopefully it felt like nobody had to be too careful about what they were saying. We certainly didn't want anybody walking on eggshells. Um, but it was hard for me at times to feel a certain way about certain things, and for me to have to keep it to myself. I think that's what causes burnout. It's also what leads to having tyrannical DMs. So my own personal coping mechanisms on how to deal with that, I think, worked. The party sense when I was kind of low at certain times, and they were very understanding and helpful when I was going through rough spots. But even though I was never upfront with them about the things that were bothering me, I think that they could sense that, you know, uh, I just needed a little bit of, I needed their energy to make the next session what it deserves to be. So I don't have any complaints about that. The sacrifices were totally worth it, and it really brought me joy to see other people enjoying themselves with a game that I was officiating. So I think the players were pretty engaged and excited throughout the campaign. At least the core group of four were very engaged, especially the ones that were pro wrestling fans before playing in the campaign. For Solomon, it was a little bit more difficult because he didn't get all the inside jokes on the NPCs, but that was all right because he's so experienced in D&D that, uh, as a DM, he kind of understood those things. Let everybody have their fun, uh, and try to bring things back to a sense of um, normalcy when the party started to get a little too geeked out about what was happening in a situation. And that was actually really nice to have somebody there bringing us back to reality. Overall, I felt like everybody was engaged, more so at certain points than others. There were times when people were kind of nodding off towards the end of a session, but I think that's going to happen when you play these late night sessions, especially in the middle of the week, and they, had a long day at work. They got to get up early the next day, so that's going to happen. But the excitement level, how do you gauge that? It's hard to tell if the players were um, genuinely excited to play or if they just wanted to get to the end. You know, early on in those beginning sessions, players would come on 15, 20 minutes early, and we'd hang out in the Discord voice chat and just talk about just getting to know each other, you know? But at the end of the campaign, players weren't coming in 15, 20 minutes early to shoot the breeze. They were coming to the session 5 and 10 minutes late. So they were waiting till the last second and then dropping in and going, let's go. Story. So that kind of sucked for me because the only time I get to really be myself and have fun are those 15 to 20 minutes before the campaign starts. After the night is over, then of course I feel very self-conscious. Did How was the session? Did you guys like it? Was it entertaining for you? Um, so the energy towards the end of the campaign, it definitely felt like it was moving towards, uh, you know, just kind of going through the motions, and that kind of stinks. So when we did wrap up the campaign, it was hard stop. We're taking a break because we needed to build up that excitement again. And when we get there, maybe that's when we start the next campaign. So did the party ultimately connect with the main story and themes? I mean, absolutely. The ones that understood, hey, this is pro wrestling, but also high fantasy D&D. That's what they got. And they were able to explore every part of pro wrestling in this role-playing game. I don't think that we left any stone unturned. If there was something they wanted to do, they had the opportunity to do it. So I think they all connected with that. I think they understood the themes of it, and we really let them steer the show. So, not to pat my own back too hard there, but yeah, I think so. I think everybody did connect with the story. So now let's talk about that final battle again and the end of the campaign. So the final boss fight was climactic. It was rewarding. If you listen to the epilogue episode, all the players got their happy ending. And that final boss battle was grueling. It was a war of attrition. It was 4 or 5 sessions in a row, a 7-part battle where they had to go through the Iron Masters. Then they had to get through Harmon Stonefist, who had betrayed the party. Then they had to get through Alfarius Cone and the Rogue's undead family. And finally, Vance McDragon in full purple dragon form. Most of it worked, but the very end scene with Vance McDragon felt rushed. And from what some of the players said, the dragon should have killed us. There's no reason that we should have survived. And that's probably true. There should have been something prepared with the scenery there to make that end battle seem a little bit more epic. But at that point, the party was completely tapped out of everything. I wanted them to feel like there was a chance of failure. And the sacrifice that was made there was, rather than to have them roll lucky or TPK, and that's just how it ends, we kind of angled the ending a little bit, a nod to pro wrestling, where we knew who we wanted to win, but we still had to go out there and perform. We had to make the crowd believe that it was real. I personally love the ending. I love what we did with Rosa, with how we changed her character and kind of set up the next story where the party finds a hidden inner strength to overcome this big bad. In the process, they save this innocent child, this this baby lion that they had raised, ultimately earns the name that they had given it, and protects them. Um, you've got the illusionist wizard who is, doing that is using parts of the battle map to effectively manipulate the battlefield. Like, I thought it was really cool, but after it was over, it definitely felt like a gut punch. It feels like when you're watching your favorite TV show series, you watch the season finale and then you realize, well, that's it. I can't believe it's over. And maybe that's what I'm feeling. Or maybe not. Maybe we did rush it. I don't know. I didn't want any I didn't want the players to die. I didn't want to jump the shark. Um, and I think we did the best that we could. I don't think it was a bad ending. I think it could have been better. And I think it was a good place to stop. You know. So was the ending satisfying for everybody? I sure hope so. I sure hope so. You know, I tried to be positive and uplifting the entire time, almost to the point where it was, a little patronizing, too gratuitous, maybe insincere. I am fans of all the players on the show, but I never wanted to put negative energy on them, even when they did something that I didn't agree with or didn't enjoy or was stealing TV time from somebody else. I've been singled out by a DM before. I never want anybody to feel that way. So there's a chance that while I was being nice to all the players all the time and mostly giving them glowing feedback, maybe they were doing the same with me as well. Maybe they didn't enjoy things as much as they say they did. And if that's the case, I appreciate you guys. Thank you for that. My mental health thanks you. Um, but it's okay to give constructive criticism because I certainly want to get better. And most of the players were more experienced with this game system than I am. So I am certainly happy to work with any of them on any of the issues they had. I would love to play with them as the DM to see how their styles are a little bit different. That way I can grow a little bit. Um, I'm always afraid to rock the boat or upset the balance. Um, but I think I did the right thing by giving all the players the ability to use their character, use all their abilities, all their equipment, all their connections, and allow them to arrive at an ending where they felt like they've done it all. There's nothing else left for them to do. There's no unfinished business. Wanted everybody to be able to walk away and go, man, that was good. That was good. So my big takeaways, my biggest lesson learned is that the players never do what you expect them to or what you want them to do. You give them a box of toys and you tell them that when they ask for things, you always tell them yes. Because ultimately, this is their story, not yours, right? So they have to have player agency, they have to have autonomy. So when they decide to leave a town they're supposed to be in and just go off to some random town that you have nothing planned for, you got to let them go and you got to pivot. That certainly happened to me a few times during this campaign, and it forced me to think outside of the box and to come up with some creative storytelling to make things make sense. It I think it worked for the most part. The campaign took 3 to 4 times longer than the content I created. At least it took longer than I expected. I felt like, I'm going to create a 5 room dungeon for each city, and we can get through that in an episode. No, no. Mm-mm. It's going to take about 3 episodes to get through a 5 room dungeon. And if you're not familiar with that format, I believe it's you face a guardian, then a puzzle, then there's a social interaction, a social piece to it. Then there's a final boss, and then there is a treasure room. Right? I think now you can swap that order around, but that's the gist of it. Is that you allow people to do all the things that make role playing games great: combat, exploration, social interaction. You wrap that up in each town, the 5 room dungeon. You move to the next one, and it just keeps things going. Boom, boom, boom. We ran 44 sessions. It was supposed to take 12. So there you go. I was foolish to think that we could expedite things. I thought that we would develop this huge online following on YouTube and Twitch. I thought I'd be able to keep up with the social media post about the show. No. Nobody's interested in your show except for you and the players. So we stopped streaming on Twitch, which I'm not great at Twitch. I think would probably need somebody else to run the Twitch while I focus on the storytelling. It was a huge distraction. The YouTube editing was great. A lot of time was put into the early videos, editing them in a way that made them really interesting. Ultimately, it was just a time sink where for a 2 hour video, it would take me 8 hours of editing. And while it taught me how to be a better editor, it also was a huge, I don't want to say waste of time, but it was a huge time investment for videos that not very many people watch. So I hope the players appreciated those. The most successful video that we made was a commercial for the Gnome Depot, which sits at around 3,000 views now. That one really took off. It's 30 seconds long. It probably took me an hour. But the other ones, I've got another video that's about 3 hours long. It took me about 8 hours to edit. I think it has somewhere around 2 to 5 views at this point. So if you're looking for validation from viewers, find your inspiration elsewhere. So changes for the future campaign. What adjustments are we going to make for next time? And I think what I'd like the next time is to have players actually appear on camera, because the still shots are not super exciting to watch, and maybe that's why we don't get a whole lot of viewers. If we can get people to have a nice camera, a decent microphone, just some nice equipment, then maybe it's more interesting to watch. It wouldn't help if you're also easy on the eyes and are an incredibly gifted voice actor. I am none of the above, by the way. But seeing somebody real behind the character would be a lot of fun, I think. We'll need to recruit new players next time around. I think that Solomon is going to be leaving the party, so that opens 2 seats at the table for folks. I think 5 is certainly the max. 4 is ideal. And finding players that have an affiliation to current players is certainly the way to go. But finding someone who has an equal interest in whatever the concept of the story is would be equally important. On a personal level, I need to have better equipment here. I need to be operating with 3 screens instead of 2. Have to get a new headset, a professional microphone. The audio's got to get better. You would be shocked at. That's not what I want to say. The idea was just, hey, let's see if we can do this in the beginning. And now that I know that we can do this, now it's, hey, let's see if we can make this professional. That's the challenge next time around. I would start the party at level 1 and work their way up. Starting at level 3, I think they got too high level, and it made it really difficult to manage. At a certain point, it was just like, hey, just tell me what happens, and I'll take your word for it, because it's too hard to follow all of those abilities. I certainly don't have the capacity for it. And again, logistically, I think playing every other week for a little bit longer makes more sense than playing every week for 2 hours. So I would certainly encourage that we do that next time around. Would give me more time to do prep work and would allow people to take a week off to build up some energy and anticipation for the next session. You just have to make sure that if you do that, people don't miss. Because if you miss, now you're going a month in between sessions, and any longer than a month, the campaign is over for you. So what's the next step? Well, I'm turning King's Road Young Lions into a D&D module, and that's happening at a leisurely pace as I kind of grind through the content and make it make sense for people who just pick up the book and don't understand it. It's going to have to be sanitized a little bit so that it just makes more sense. But I wouldn't mind doing a one shot. I wouldn't mind playing in somebody else's campaign, and I'm certainly going to take a break. One shots are a lot of fun to play in. I absolutely love playing in them, but it's hard to recruit people to show up for those things, right? Imagine you're trying to get people to show up for a one shot. You got 5 people. Yeah, I'm in. You've had all these outside conversations. You get 3 to show up on game night. It stinks, but there's no investment there. If people just skip it, it's like, so what? I'll just catch the next one. So you're really rolling the dice on a one shot. Of course, we talked about taking this break. I can feel my mental health recharging and growing stronger. My tank is refilling at this point, so it's all good. We'll get to the point where I'm really ready to dive into the next creative project. Just not there yet. And will there be a new campaign with this core group at some point? I certainly hope so. I just don't know if it'll be in the same game world or if I'll be the DM, but it seems like we understand each other pretty well, and I've been pretty candid and open with everybody here. I'm glad to hear when they talk about their families or their work lives and how things are going for them. I certainly wish the best for them. It would be great if we could actually get to a real table, but with us being spread all over the country, it makes it really difficult to pull that off. And I think it might ruin the mental image I have of everybody if we saw each other in person. We may be disgusted by each other. I don't know. Things are so good right now that I would hate to change anything. But we need to level up for campaign 2. So with that said, it's time to wrap things up. I want to end with a toast as everybody continues to head down their own personal road. This campaign was too sweet. And as a great man once said, I'm stealing this, but feel free to use it. Hard work pays off and dreams come true. Campaigns don't last forever, but great stories do. I've been Saucey. You've been great. Take care, everybody. Hey, congratulations. If you're still listening, that means you made it to the end of the episode. Thanks for coming by and listening to this edition of Kings Road Young Lions. If you like what you've heard, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, and leave a comment down below of what you'd like to see on the next episode. For more great content from This Is Awesome Promotions, check out the YouTube channel, check out the Twitch channel, check us out on Twitter at TIA Promotions. Thanks again for coming around, and we'll see you next time down on the King's Road.